The diner smelled of grease and yesterday's dreams, a worn-in kind of place where the coffee was strong and the linoleum was cracked. Ellie Harper wiped her hands on her apron, the fabric frayed at the edges from years of scrubbing tables and balancing trays. She was 24, but her eyes carried the weight of someone older, as someone who'd seen too many late shifts and too few tips. The diner, a small joint called Marty's on the edge of a sleepy Midwestern town, was her world, at least for now. She told herself it was temporary, just until she could save enough to move to Chicago, maybe go back to school. But every paycheck seemed to vanish into rent, bills, and her mum's medical debts, leaving her dreams as distant as the city's skyline. It was a slow Tuesday morning, the kind where the clock ticked louder than the chatter. A few regulars hunched over their plate. He saw old Mr. Thompson with his eggs over easy, muttering about the weather, and a trucker nursing a mug of black coffee in the corner. Ellie was refilling the sugar dispensers when the bell above the door jingled. She glanced up, expecting another familiar face, but instead saw a man and a little girl. He was tall, maybe late 30s, with a worn denim jacket and dark circles under his eyes. His dark hair was mussed, like he'd run his hands through it one too many times. The girl, no older than 6, clung to his hand, her pigtails uneven and her sneakers scuffed. Her pink sweater had a hole near the elbow, and her eyes were wide, scanning the diner like it was a foreign land. Ellie grabbed 2 menus and walked over, her sneakers squeaking against the floor. "Morning," she said, flashing her practiced waitress smile. "Booth or counter?" The man hesitated, his gaze flickering to the girl, then back to Ellie. "Booth, please," he said, his voice low, almost hoarse, like he hadn't spoken much that day. Ellie led them to a corner booth by the window, where the sunlight spilled in, catching dust motes in the air. The girl slid in first, her small frame barely taking up space, and the man followed, setting a tattered backpack beside him. Ellie handed them the menus, noticing the way his hands shook slightly as he took them. Not drunk, she thought, just a broken bar tired. She'd seen that kind of exhaustion before. Her parents stretched thin, counting pennies to make it through the day. "Coffee?" she offered, holding up the pot she'd grabbed on the way. He glanced at the menu, then at the girl, who was staring at the pictures of pancakes with a kind of quiet awe. Yeah," he said. "Just one, though, and a broken bar, maybe a water for her." "Got it," Ellie said, pouring him a steaming mug. "I'll give you a minute to decide." She stepped back, but not before catching the way the girl's eyes lingered on the menu, her small fingers tracing the image of a chocolate chip pancake stack. Ellie's chest tightened. She knew that look of wanting something you knew you couldn't have. She busied herself behind the counter, wiping down the same spot she'd cleaned 10 minutes ago. Marty, the owner, was in the back, probably arguing with the supplier over late deliveries. Ellie kept an eye on the booth, watching the man lean down to whisper to the girl. She giggled softly, and his face softened for a moment, the lines of worry easing. Ellie wondered what their story was. A single dad, maybe, down on his luck. The backpack suggested they were traveling, but there was no suitcase, no car keys on the table, just the 2 of them, adrift. When she returned to take their order, the man cleared his throat. "Just the coffee for me," he said, avoiding her eyes. "And a broken bar or plain pancake for her." "Smallest one you've got." Ellie glanced at the girl, who was still staring at the menu, her finger now on a picture of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. "Sure thing," Ellie said, jotting it down. "Anything else?" He shook his head quickly. "No, that's all, thanks." Ellie nodded and turned away, but something gnawed at her. The diner wasn't exactly gourmet, but a plain pancake. No butter, no syrup, no nothing. And the way he'd said it, "smallest one you've got," like he was calculating every cent. She'd seen customers like that before, the ones who'd count out change from their pockets, hoping they had enough. She glanced at her tip jar by the register, half empty as usual. Her last paycheck had barely covered the electric bill, and her mum's next doctor's appointment was looming. But still, that girl's facing a broken bar. In the kitchen, Ellie handed the order slip to Jose Tilda Copyright, the cook, who was flipping bacon with the focus of a surgeon. "1 plain pancake," she said. Jose Tilda Copyright raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No sides?" "Nope, just the pancake." She hesitated, then leaned in. "Hey, can you make it quick? And a broken bar, maybe throw in some chocolate chips." "Don't tell Marty." Jose Tilda Copyright grinned, shaking his head. "You're gonna get us both fired, Ellie." Yeah, she muttered, but she was already grabbing a to-go cup from the stack. She filled it with hot chocolate, added a dollop of whipped cream, and stuck a lid on it. Her tips were supposed to go toward her savings, but what was $5 in the grand scheme? She'd make it up tomorrow, or the next day. Back at the booth, she set the pancake down in front of the girl, who gasped at the sight of the chocolate chips. "I thought you said plain?" the man said, his brow furrowing. Ellie shrugged, keeping her voice light. "Kitchen must have messed up. No charge for the extras." She slid the hot chocolate toward the girl. "And this is on the house. Slow day, You know, the man's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ellie thought he might argue. But the girl's face lit up, her eyes wide as she looked at the cup, then at Ellie, then back at the cup. Thank you, she said, her voice small but bright. The man's expression softened, though his eyes were still guarded. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Ellie waved it off. It's just coffee and a pancake. No big deal. She turned away before he could say more, feeling his gaze on her back as she walked to the counter. She didn't want gratitude. She just wanted the kid to have something nice for once. The rest of the morning dragged on. The man and the girl stayed for a while, the girl savoring her pancake bite by bite, the man sipping his coffee like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Ellie kept busy, refilling Mr. Thompson's coffee and clearing plates, but she couldn't help glancing at the booth. There was something about them, something that felt like a story she didn't know the ending to. When they finally stood to leave, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He set it on the table, along with a few coins. Ellie watched from the counter, pretending to reorganize the napkin dispenser. The bill was barely enough to cover the coffee and pancake, let alone a dip, but she didn't care. She'd known it was coming. The girl tugged on her dad's sleeve, whispering something. He nodded, and she scampered over to Ellie, holding out a folded piece of paper. This is for you, she said, her voice shy but clear. Ellie took it, surprised. Thanks, sweetheart. She unfolded it to find a crayon drawing a stick figure with curly hair, a tray in one hand, and a big smile. Underneath, in wobbly letters, it said, "Best waitress ever." Ellie's throat tightened. This is awesome, she said, crouching down to the girl's level. You're an artist, huh? The girl beamed, then ran back to her dad. He gave Ellie a nod, his expression unreadable, and they left, the bell jingling behind them. Ellie tucked the drawing into her apron pocket, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. It wasn't money, but it was something. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. More coffee, more plates, more complaints from Marty about the dishwasher being on the fritz. By the time she clocked out at 3 p.m., her feet ached, and her apron was stained with ketchup and grease. She pulled out the drawing again, smiling at the crooked lines. Maybe it wasn't Chicago, but moments like this made the long hours bearable. As she locked up the diner, she didn't notice the sleek black car parked across the street, its driver watching her walk down the sidewalk. She didn't see the man inside, the same man from the booth, his denim jacket gone, replaced by a tailored suit. And she definitely didn't know that the crumpled $5 bill he'd left was the last of the cash he'd carried that day, or that his bank account held millions. Ellie walked home, the drawing in her pocket, unaware that her small act of kindness had set something in motion, something that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. 2 weeks later, Ellie was back at Marty's, pouring coffee for the morning crowd. The diner hadn't changed yet, the same cracked linoleum, same flickering neon sign, but something felt different. Maybe it was the way the regulars had started tipping a little better, or the fact that her mom's latest test results were promising, or maybe it was the crayon drawing she'd taped to her fridge, a reminder of the little girl and her dad. The bell jingled, and Ellie looked up, expecting another regular. Instead, a man in a sharp suit walked in, his polished shoes out of place against the greasy floor. It took her a second to recognize him. The same tired eyes, the same dark hair, now neatly combed. The man from the booth. No little girl this time, no backpack, just him, looking like he'd stepped out of a different world. "Hi," he said, his voice smoother now, less strained. "Ellie, right?" She blinked, glancing at her name tag. "Yeah, good to see you again. Where's your daughter?" He smiled, a real one this time, not the tight-lipped one from before. "She's at school. I came to talk to you." Ellie's stomach twisted. Had she done something wrong? Overstepped with the hot chocolate? "Okay," she said cautiously, setting down the coffee pot. "What's up?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket and slid it across the counter. "This is for you." She frowned, picking it up. It was heavy, official looking, with her name written in neat script. "What's this?" "Open it," he said. She did, her fingers trembling. Inside was a check of 6 figures, more money than she'd ever seen. Her breath caught. "What a broken bar. What is this?" "My name's Daniel Carter," he said, leaning against the counter. "I'm not what I seemed that day. I was a broken bar going through something, trying to keep things normal for my daughter. You didn't know that, but you helped us anyway. That meant more than you can imagine." Ellie stared at the check, her mind reeling. "This is too much. I just gave her a hot chocolate." He shook his head. "You gave her kindness. You gave me a moment to breathe. I don't forget things like that." She tried to protest, but he held up a hand. "It's not just money. There's a letter in there too, a scholarship offer. Full ride. Any school you want." "I looked into you, Ellie. You're smart. You deserve a shot." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said, stepping back. "Just keep being you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and my daughter says hi. She's still talking about those chocolate chips." The bell jingled as he left, and Ellie stood there, clutching the envelope, her world tilting. She didn't know it yet, but that check would pay off her mum's debts, and the scholarship would send her to Chicago. And years later, when she was a teacher, she'd tell her students about the day she bought a coffee for a stranger, not knowing he was a millionaire, but knowing, deep down, that kindness was worth more than money. Ellie Harper's sneakers squeaked against the cracked linoleum of Marty's diner, the familiar rhythm of her steps blending with the hum of the coffee maker and the low murmur of early morning regulars. The air carried the scent of bacon grease and burnt toast, a comforting constant in her chaotic life. At 24, Ellie was tethered to this small Midwestern town by her mother's medical bills and a stubborn hope that one day she'd save enough to chase her dream of moving to Chicago. For now, though, she was here, pouring coffee and scraping by on tips that barely covered her rent. The diner was quiet that Tuesday, the kind of quiet that made the clocks ticking feel louder than the conversations. Old Mr. Thompson grumbled over his eggs, and a lone trucker stared into his mug like it held the answers to life's problems. Ellie was refilling ketchup bottles when the bell above the door jingled, announcing new customers. She looked up to see a man and a little girl step inside. He was tall, with a worn denim jacket and a face etched with exhaustion, his dark hair messy as if he'd been tugging at it. The girl, maybe 6, clung to his hand, her pigtails uneven and her sneakers scuffed, a hole in the elbow of her pink sweater. They looked out of place, like they'd wandered in from a different story. Ellie grabbed 2 menus and approached, her smile automatic but warm. "Morning. Booth or counter?" she asked. The man's eyes flicked to the girl, then back to Ellie. "Booth, please," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't slept in days. She led them to a corner booth by the window, where the morning light spilled in, catching flecks of dust in the air. The girl slid in first, her small frame barely denting the vinyl seat, and the man followed, setting a tattered backpack beside him. Ellie handed them the menus, noticing the faint tremble in his hands as he took them. Not nerves, she thought, it just bone-deep weariness. She'd seen it before in customers who counted every penny, their eyes scanning menus for the cheapest option. "Coffee?" she offered, holding up the pot. He nodded, glancing at the girl, who was studying the menu with wide eyes. "Just one. And a water for her, please." "Got it," Ellie said, pouring him a mug and leaving them to decide. As she walked back to the counter, she caught the girl tracing a picture of chocolate chip pancakes with her finger, her expression a mix of longing and restraint. Ellie knew that look of wanting something you couldn't ask for. It tugged at her, sharp and familiar. She busied herself wiping down the counter, but her mind stayed on the booth. The man leaned down to whisper to the girl, who giggled softly, and for a moment, his tired face softened. Ellie wondered about the mirror single dad, maybe, down on his luck, passing through town with nowhere else to go. When she returned to take their order, the man cleared his throat. "Just the coffee for me," he said, not meeting her eyes. "And a plain pancake for her. Smallest one you've got." Ellie glanced at the girl, still staring at the menu's hot chocolate picture, her finger hovering over the whipped cream. "Sure thing," Ellie said, scribbling it down. "Anything else?" He shook his head, quick and final. "No, that's all, thanks." She turned away, but the order sat heavy in her chest. A plain pancake, no extras, no frills. She'd seen customers like this before, stretching their last dollars to feed their kids. Her own tips were meager. Her jar by the register held maybe $10 from the morning, but she couldn't shake the girl's hopeful eyes. In the kitchen, she handed the order slip to Jose Tilda Copyright, the cook, who was flipping bacon with practiced ease. "One plain pancake," she said. Jose Tilda Copyright raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" "Yeah." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Can you add some chocolate chips?" "Don't tell Marty." Jose Tilda Copyright smirked. "Your trouble, Ellie." She grinned, grabbing a to-go cup and filling it with hot chocolate, topping it with a swirl of whipped cream. It was a small gesture, maybe $5 out of her tips, but she'd make it up somehow. Back at the booth, she set the pancake in front of the girl, who gasped at the chocolate chips. "I thought you said plain?" the man said, his brow creasing. Ellie shrugged. "Kitchen mix-up, no charge for the extras." She slid the hot chocolate toward the girl. "And this is on the house." "Slow day." The man's jaw tightened, and Ellie braced for an argument, but the girl's face lit up, her eyes darting between the cup and Ellie. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but bright. "You didn't have to do that," the man said, his tone softer but still guarded. "It's just a drink," Ellie said, waving it off. "Enjoy." She walked away before he could say more, feeling his eyes on her as she returned to the counter. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of refills and small talk, but she kept glancing at the booth. The girl ate her pancake slowly, savoring each bite, while the man sipped his coffee like it was his lifeline. When they left, he placed a crumpled $5 bill and some coins on the table, barely enough to cover the order. The girl ran over to Ellie, holding out a folded piece of paper. "For you," she said shyly. Ellie unfolded it to find a crayon drawing a stick figure with curly hair holding a tray, labeled Best Waitress Ever. Her throat tightened. "This is amazing," she said, crouching to the girl's level. "You're an artist." The girl beamed and scampered back to her dad, who gave Ellie a nod before they left. She tucked the drawing into her apron, a small warmth blooming in her chest. As she locked up later, she didn't notice the black car across the street, its driver watching her. She didn't know the man inside, now in a suit instead of a denim jacket, was the same one she'd surveyed or that his bank account held millions. 2 weeks later, Ellie was wiping down the counter at Marty's, the morning rush just starting to ebb. The diner was the same as ever, a greasy air, flickering neon sign, the hum of the same old radio. But something felt different, lighter, maybe because her mom's latest doctor's visit had brought good news, or because the crayon drawing taped to her fridge made her smile every morning. She was pouring coffee for Mr. Thompson when the bell jingled, and she looked up, expecting another regular. Instead, a man in a tailored suit stepped inside, his polished shoes gleaming against the dull floor. It took her a moment to recognize him. The same dark hair, the same tired eyes, now sharper, more composed. The man from the booth, but transformed, like he'd stepped out of a boardroom instead of a rough night. No little girl, no backpack, just him, carrying an air of quiet confidence. "Hi," he said, his voice smoother now, less raw. "Ellie, right?" She glanced at her name tag, confused. "Yeah, good to see you again. Where's your daughter?" He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "At school. I came to talk to you." Her stomach twisted. Had she overstepped with the hot chocolate? Broken some rule she didn't know about? "Okay," she said, setting the coffee pot down. "What's up?" He pulled an envelope from his suit pocket and slid it across the counter. It was thick, cream-colored, with her name written in neat script. "This is for you," he said. She frowned, picking it up. It felt heavy, important. "What's this?" "Open it," he urged, his tone gentle but firm. Her fingers fumbled as she tore it open. Inside was a check, the numbers so large they didn't seem real. 6 figures, more money than she'd ever imagined holding. Tucked behind it was a letter, embossed with the logo of a foundation she didn't recognize. Her breath caught, and she looked up at him, her voice shaky. "What a broken bar. What is this?" "My name's Daniel Carter," he said, leaning against the counter, his eyes steady on hers. "I wasn't entirely honest when we met. I was going through a rough patch, trying to keep things normal for my daughter, Lily. You didn't know that, but you helped us anyway. You gave us more than coffee and a pancake here. You gave us kindness when I was at my lowest." Ellie's mind raced, the check trembling in her hands. "This is too much." "It was just a hot chocolate, a few chocolate chips." "I can't." He held up a hand, stopping her. "It wasn't just that. You saw us, really saw us, when most people would have looked away. That day, I was a broken bar, lost, trying to figure out how to be a dad, how to keep Lily safe after everything fell apart. Your small gesture had reminded me there's still good in the world." She shook her head, the numbers on the check blurring as her eyes stung. "But these are broken bar. This is life-changing money. I don't deserve it." "You do," he said firmly. "And it's not just money. Read the letter." She unfolded it, scanning the words. It was an offer for a full-ride scholarship to any university of her choice, funded by the Carter Foundation. Her heart pounded. "A scholarship? How did you?" "I did some digging," he admitted, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You're smart, Ellie. You've been putting everyone else first. To your mum, this diner, strangers like me. It's time someone put you first. That scholarship is yours, no strings attached. Pick a school, any school. Chicago, if that's still your dream." Ellie's knees felt weak, and she gripped the counter for support. Chicago. The word alone conjured images of city lights, lecture halls, a life beyond the diner's greasy walls. She thought of her mum, the hospital bills that kept her awake at night, the dreams she'd buried under years of double shifts. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said, straightening. "Just take it, use it, make something of it." He paused, his smile softening. "Oh, and Lily says hi. She's still talking about those chocolate chips. Wants to know if you can teach her how to make pancakes." Ellie laughed, a choked sound that was half a sob. "Tell her she's got the deal." He nodded, turning to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing," he said, glancing back. "That drawing she gave you? She spent all morning on it. Said you were her hero." The bell jingled as he left, and Ellie stood frozen, clutching the envelope. The diner seemed quieter, the world outside sharper, like everything had shifted in an instant. She looked at the check again, the numbers real now, not a dream. It was enough to clear her mum's debts, to give them breathing room for the first time in years. The scholarship letter felt even heavier, a ticket to a future she'd thought was out of reach. She tucked the envelope into her apron, her hands still shaking, and went back to work, pouring coffee for Mr. Thompson, who was now complaining about the price of gas. But her mind was elsewhere, spinning with possibilities. She thought of the girl, Lily, and her crayon drawing, still taped to the fridge in Ellie's tiny apartment. She thought of Daniel, a man who looked like he was carrying the world that day, but who turned out to be carrying millions and a heart big enough to repay a small kindness with a life-changing gift. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Marty grumbled about the dishwasher, Jose Tilda copyright teased her about sneaking extra bacon to a customer, and the regulars came and went. But Ellie felt different, like a weight had lifted. When she clocked out, she walked home under a sky streaked with pink, the envelope in her pocket a quiet promise. She didn't know it yet, but that check would pay off her mum's medical bills within weeks, freeing them from the shadow of debt. The scholarship would take her to Chicago, to a university where she'd study education, her dream of teaching no longer just a fantasy. Years later, Ellie would stand in a classroom, her students' faces bright with curiosity. She'd tell them a story not about the money, but about the day she bought a coffee and a hot chocolate for a stranger and his daughter. She'd tell them how kindness could ripple, how a small gesture could change everything, even when you didn't know the whole story. And in her desk drawer, she'd keep a faded crayon drawing, a stick figure with curly hair labeled best waitress ever, a reminder that sometimes, the smallest moments held the biggest futures.